Carl Jung discovered that the most dangerous psychological pandemic is not insanity, but conformity. He realized that entire societies could hallucinate a reality that doesn't exist, driven by a desperate, unconscious need to avoid the pain of individual consciousness. But within this sleeping mass, there are always outliers, individuals like you, who are cursed with the inability to ignore what everyone else refuses to see. You have likely spent years wondering why you cannot simply blend in, why the things that bring comfort to your peers often bring a sense of profound unease to you. You feel a friction, a subtle tearing in the fabric of your daily interactions, as if you are watching a play where everyone knows the lines except you, or perhaps, more accurately, you are the only one in the audience who realizes the actors are dead. Jung identified this not as a social failure, but as a critical evolutionary function. You are not broken, you are functioning exactly as nature intended, operating under what we might call the Sentinel Protocol. To understand why this feels like a curse, we must look at the architecture of the human mind through both Jungian psychology and modern neuroscience. Jung argued that the collective unconscious is not just a repository of myths, but a shared psychic atmosphere. When a society or a group agrees on a specific worldview, a cultural narrative, or a moral certainty, they create a collective blind spot. This is a psychic dead zone where all the uncomfortable truths, the contradictions, and the dark realities of that group are dumped. Jung called this the shadow, but not just the personal shadow. This is the collective shadow. To belong to the tribe, the individual must agree to become blind to this shadow. It is an unconscious contract signed in blood. I will ignore the truth so that I may be loved. However, your brain is wired differently. Modern neuroscience offers a startling validation of Jung's intuition here. When an individual conforms to a group opinion they know is wrong, fMRI scans show a decrease in activity in the visual cortex and the frontal regions associated with critical analysis. The brain literally dims its perception of reality to match the herd. This is a survival mechanism mediated by the release of oxytocin and dopamine when we align with others. But for you, this dimming mechanism malfunctions. When you witness the collective lie, the workplace toxicity everyone ignores, the family secret swept under the rug, the societal obsession that feels hollow, your anterior cingulate cortex, the brain's error detection center, lights up like a chaotic storm. You do not get the sedative of conformity. You get the cortisol of cognitive dissonance. You suffer from what I call Hyper-Lucidity Syndrome. This condition makes you feel isolated, but Jung suggested that the person who sees the blind spot carries the most vital information for the survival of the group. The group, in its blind march toward comfort, walks toward a cliff. Only the individual who has been pushed to the margins, the one who is not hypnotized by the collective chant, can see the edge. Jung famously stated that the individual is the only reality. He meant that the collective is a statistical fiction, a monster of averages. Only you, the suffering individual, possess the capacity for genuine consciousness. But this insight comes with a terrible price: the projection of the group's shadow onto you. Consider the case of a patient we shall call Elias. Elias came to therapy convinced he was a sociopath. He worked in a high-stakes corporate environment that prided itself on radical transparency and family values. Yet, Elias felt physically ill during the mandatory team-building retreats. While his colleagues wept and hugged, sharing performative vulnerabilities, Elias felt a cold, sharp detachment. He saw the power dynamics hiding behind the tears. He saw that transparency was actually a surveillance mechanism to enforce loyalty. Because he could not participate in the emotional contagion, his colleagues labeled him cold, arrogant, and not a culture fit. He absorbed these labels. He believed them. He thought he lacked empathy. In reality, Elias was experiencing empathic override. His mirror neurons were not failing. They were being overruled by his intuitive function, which sensed the danger in the room. Jung would argue that Elias was not lacking feeling. He was possessed by the transcendent function, the ability to hold the tension between the persona of the group and the reality of the shadow. The group needed Elias to be the cold one so they could feel like the warm ones. They projected their own lack of authenticity onto him, making him the vessel for their collective coldness. This is the mechanism of the scapegoat. If you have ever been the black sheep of your family or the troublemaker at work simply for pointing out a contradiction, you have served as the vessel for the collective blind spot. The tragedy is that most people in your position try to cure themselves of their sight. You try to force your brain to release the conformity chemicals. You drink the alcohol. You nod at the empty conversations. You buy the things you are told will make you happy, hoping to induce the numbness that seems to protect everyone else. But it never works. The shadow, once seen, cannot be unseen. Jung warned that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. You are stuck in the darkness, not because you are fallen, but because you have descended into the basement of the collective psyche to find the keys everyone else has lost. This creates a specific psychological profile. You likely oscillate between feelings of grandiosity, thinking you are smarter than everyone else, and crushing inferiority, feeling like an alien who doesn't belong on this planet. This oscillation is a symptom of the Atlas complex. You are unconsciously carrying the weight of the unconscious awareness that those around you have discarded. You are doing the psychological heavy lifting for your tribe, processing the emotions and truths they are too weak to face. And because they do not thank you for this, because they actually punish you for it, you become resentful. But there is a map to navigate this territory. Jung didn't just diagnose the pathology of the outlier, he charted a path for the integration of this burden. He realized that the ability to see the blind spot manifests in specific stages of psychological development. You are likely stuck in the friction of the second stage, unaware that there is a third. To move forward, we must first categorize the way this sight manifests in your life. We must identify which type of seer you have become so we can dismantle the trap you are currently caught in. There are 4 distinct manifestations of those who see the collective blind spot. Understanding which one you embody is the first step toward turning your isolation into power. The first manifestation is what I call the Silent Diagnostic. This occurs when your insight is internalized entirely. You see the lies, the manipulations, and the inevitable outcomes of bad decisions made by those around you, but you have learned that speaking generates conflict. So you go silent, you develop a flat effect, you become the observer in the corner. Psychologically, this is a state of high internal entropy. Your brain is consuming massive amounts of energy, suppressing your truth to ensure safety. In the brain, this overactivates the amygdala, keeping you in a state of low-grade chronic freeze response. You are safe, but you are slowly rotting from the inside, choked by the truths you swallow daily. You think you are keeping the peace, but you are actually engaging in self-erasure. The second manifestation is the Cassandra archetype. Unlike the Silent Diagnostic, you speak, you warn, you point out the inconsistencies. If we do this, it will fail. That person is lying to us. This relationship is abusive. But because your delivery is often charged with the anxiety of being the only one who sees, you sound hysterical or negative to others. The tone policing of the group kicks in. They don't hear your warning, they hear your attitude. When the disaster you predicted finally happens, they don't credit you. They resent you for being right. This leads to a cycle of bitter vindication. You are addicted to the "I told you so" moment because it is the only time your reality is validated, yet it leaves you more isolated than before. The third manifestation is perhaps the most dangerous, the shadow eater. This happens when you have been the receptacle for the group's negativity for so long that you begin to identify with it. You become the villain they need. If they treat you like a rebel, you become a rebel without a cause. If they treat you like you are crazy, you lean into erratic behavior. You allow the collective blind spot to consume your identity. In neuroscience terms, your neural pathways for self-perception become entangled with the negative feedback loops of your environment. You achieve a twisted form of belonging by becoming the enemy of the group. You are connected to them, but only through conflict. The fourth and rarest manifestation is the one we are aiming for. This is the alchemical observer. The alchemical observer is capable of witnessing the dysfunction without being infected by it. You see the shadow of the group, you acknowledge it, but you do not allow it to trigger your own shadow. You realize that the collective blindness is not a personal attack on you, but a structural necessity for their current level of consciousness. You stop trying to wake people up who are pretending to be asleep. Instead, you use the data to navigate the terrain safely. You treat the hidden undercurrents of your environment not as emotional baggage, but as weather patterns, predictable, navigable, and impersonal. This is the state of true individuation. How do you transition from the suffering of the scapegoat to the power of the observer? Jung suggests that the only way out is through. You cannot retreat back into the blindness of the herd. Your brain has already been rewired. You cannot unsee the truth. Therefore, you must expand your container to hold it. You must undergo a process I call voluntary disillusionment. Most people spend their lives avoiding disillusionment, but for the Jungian adept, it is the holy grail. To be disillusioned is to be stripped of illusions. It is to see reality naked. To achieve this, you must first engage in cognitive decoupling. Modern neuroscience tells us that our emotional reaction to a social situation happens milliseconds before our conscious thought. Your amygdala fires a threat signal when you perceive the group's hypocrisy. Usually, you immediately identify with this signal. I am angry, or I am hurt. The alchemical observer introduces a micro-pause. You must learn to view your own neurochemical reaction as a separate object. You are not the anger, you are the space in which the anger is happening. Next, you must cultivate what I term the mirror shield. When the collective shadow is projected onto you, when they blame you for the tension they created, you usually absorb it. You try to defend yourself, which only validates their projection. Instead, you must become a perfect, polished mirror. You do not defend, you do not attack, you simply reflect. When the toxic family member accuses you of destroying the peace because you mentioned the elephant in the room, you do not argue. You simply state, I see that you are very upset by this topic. You return the energy to its source without metabolizing it. By refusing to accept the projection, you force the group to keep their own shadow. This is uncomfortable for them, but it is liberating for you. You are no longer their waste management system. This process requires you to accept a profound truth that Jung returned to again and again. The price of consciousness is loneliness, but this is not the loneliness of abandonment. It is the loneliness of the mountaintop. It is sovereign solitude. As you withdraw your need for validation from the collective, your brain's reward system begins to shift. You stop craving the cheap dopamine of group approval and start running on the serotonin of self-respect. You begin to realize that your blind spot detection is actually a form of precognition. You can see where the bad ideas will lead long before they get there. This allows you to position yourself strategically. While the herd grazes near the edge of the cliff, secure in their mutual blindness, you quietly move to higher ground. You are not doing this to feel superior, you are doing it to survive. And paradoxically, this makes you more valuable to the group than ever before. When the inevitable crisis hits, when the blind spot manifests as reality and the herd panics, they will look for the one person who isn't surprised. They will look for the one who saw it coming. They will look for you. You are not broken. You are the early warning system of the species. Nature produces individuals like you, those with hyper-lucidity and selective empathic immunity, because the group needs a designated driver for the psyche. They may mock the designated driver while they are intoxicated on their collective illusions, but when the crash comes, you are the only one capable of taking the wheel. So, do not envy the blind, do not wish for the comfort of the sleeping. Your pain is the growing pain of a new faculty of perception opening up within the human mind. You are the universe becoming aware of its own shadow. Wear your insight like a heavy coat in winter. It may weigh you down, but it is the only thing keeping you from freezing to death in the cold winds of unconsciousness. The task is not to fix the world, but to endure the vision of it with your soul intact. See you in the next dimension.